Genghis Khan is often remembered as a military genius, a unifier of tribes, and the founder of the largest contiguous empire in human history. His name is spoken with awe and fear even centuries later. Statues are raised, books are written, and documentaries praise his strategic brilliance. But behind the legend of the great conqueror exists a far darker reality, one that is rarely discussed in full detail. This is the story of what Genghis Khan did to his slaves and captives, actions so shocking that even by medieval standards they were considered extreme. To understand this story, we must first understand the world Genghis Khan was born into. The Mongolian steppe was a brutal place where survival depended on strength, loyalty, and dominance. Slavery was not an abstract concept or a moral question. It was a daily reality. Tribes raided each other constantly, capturing women, children, and men who would be forced into servitude. Genghis Khan himself experienced this firsthand. As a child, his family was abandoned by their tribe and left to starve. His wife was kidnapped and enslaved by a rival clan. These experiences hardened him and shaped his world. Mercy was weakness. Fear was power. When Genghis Khan began his rise to power, slavery became a cornerstone of his expanding empire. Every conquered city, every defeated army produced thousands of captives. These people were not treated as human beings. They were counted, sorted, and distributed like property. Skilled artisans were separated from farmers. Young women were separated from the elderly. Children were taken from their parents. Families were ripped apart within hours of capture, never to see each other again. One of the most shocking practices involved the systematic use of slaves as human shields. During sieges, Mongol armies often forced captives to march in front of their troops. These slaves were pushed toward enemy walls, knowing they would be the first to be struck by arrows, boiling oil, and stones. If they refused to walk forward, they were killed on the spot. To the Mongols, these people had already served their purpose by absorbing enemy fire. Their deaths were calculated and intentional. Slaves were also used to fill moats during sieges. Captured men, women, and children were driven into trenches and ditches until their bodies formed a bridge of flesh and bone. Only then would Mongol soldiers cross over them to attack city walls. This was not done in moments of desperation. It was done deliberately as a tactic to conserve Mongol lives. To Genghis Khan, the lives of slaves were expendable resources, nothing more. Sexual slavery was another horrific reality. Women taken during raids were distributed among Mongol warriors as rewards. Young and beautiful women were reserved for commanders and the Khan himself. Many were forced into lifelong sexual servitude. Refusal was not an option. Resistance meant death. Some women were passed from one owner to another until their bodies were broken beyond use. Others were kept as concubines, producing children who would never know freedom or identity. Genghis Khan himself kept a vast number of enslaved women. Historical records suggest that he fathered hundreds, perhaps thousands of children through these forced unions. Modern genetic studies indicate that a significant percentage of men across Asia share his DNA today. This is not a testament to romance or love, but evidence of mass sexual violence carried out on an imperial scale. Children born to enslaved women faced grim fates. Some were raised within Mongol society, but many were treated as disposable labor. Boys were often trained as servants, soldiers, or human tools for dangerous tasks. Girls were groomed to become future slaves or concubines. Their lives were decided at birth with no chance of escape. Another shocking practice involved the use of slaves in psychological warfare. Genghis Khan understood that terror could defeat enemies before battles even began. After conquering a city, he would often execute slaves in public in gruesome ways. Heads were stacked into pyramids. Bodies were displayed outside city gates. Survivors were intentionally allowed to escape so they could spread stories of horror to the next target. Slaves became instruments of fear, both in life and death. Slaves were also used as experimental subjects. In some cases, they were forced to test new weapons or tactics. If a method failed, it was not considered a loss. It was simply data collected through suffering. Their pain was irrelevant, only results mattered. Perhaps one of the most chilling aspects was how normal this cruelty became within the Mongol system. Orders were carried out without hesitation. Killing slaves was routine. Beatings, torture, and executions were everyday occurrences. Compassion was discouraged and punished. Soldiers who showed mercy risked death themselves. Genghis Khan demanded absolute obedience and emotional detachment from suffering. Even loyalty did not guarantee safety. Slaves who served faithfully for years could be killed on a whim. A bad day, a suspicion of betrayal, or simple boredom could seal their fate. There were no laws protecting them. Their lives had no value beyond immediate usefulness. Genghis Khan also practiced collective punishment. If a slave attempted to escape, entire groups of captives could be executed as a warning. Sometimes one person's mistake led to the deaths of hundreds. This created an environment of constant fear, where slaves monitored each other, knowing that one act of defiance could doom them all. The use of slaves extended beyond warfare into daily life. Massive construction projects relied on enslaved labor. Roads, palaces, and fortifications were built on the backs of captives who worked until exhaustion or death. Food was scarce, medical care non-existent. Those who collapsed were left to die where they fell. Religious slaves faced additional horrors. Genghis Khan was tolerant of religions that served his empire, but hostile toward those who resisted. Captured religious leaders who refused to submit were humiliated, tortured, and executed publicly. Their followers were enslaved to break their spiritual resistance. Faith was crushed through suffering. Despite all this, Genghis Khan believed he was justified. He saw himself as chosen by the eternal sky to rule the world. In his mind, conquest and cruelty were not evil but destiny. Slaves were proof of divine favor. Their suffering was confirmation of his greatness. It is important to understand that these actions were not isolated incidents or exaggerations created by enemies. They are recorded by Persian, Chinese, Arab, and even Mongol sources. Multiple cultures independently describe the same patterns of brutality. This was not propaganda. It was reality. Some historians attempt to soften this image by arguing that such practices were common at the time. While slavery was widespread, the scale and systematic nature of Mongol brutality was exceptional. Even contemporaries were horrified. Cities surrendered without a fight simply to avoid what they had heard the Mongols did to slaves and captives. There were moments when Genghis Khan spared slaves, but these decisions were always strategic. Mercy was a tool, not a virtue. A city that surrendered early might see its population enslaved rather than slaughtered. But enslavement itself was a slow death for many. As the empire expanded, the number of slaves grew into the millions. Entire regions were depopulated. Cultures vanished. Languages disappeared. Behind the empire's success was an ocean of human suffering that history often glosses over. When Genghis Khan died, his empire continued these practices. His sons and grandsons inherited not only his lands but his methods. Slavery remained central to Mongol rule for generations. The machine of conquest fed on human lives long after its creator was gone. Today, Genghis Khan is celebrated in some places as a national hero. His face appears on currency and monuments. But remembering his achievements without acknowledging his crimes creates a dangerous illusion. History must be seen in full, not selectively. This story is not told to shock for the sake of shock. It is told to remind us that greatness built on suffering carries a cost that echoes through centuries. The slaves who died unnamed and forgotten deserve to be remembered as much as the conqueror who enslaved them. If this story made you uncomfortable, that is the point. History is not meant to comfort us. It is meant to teach us. And the lesson here is clear: power without humanity leaves scars that never truly